It takes courage to speak the truth, and Parisia is an American Freedom Alliance production where we celebrate and elevate those with that courage. Well, hello. It's just absolutely wonderful to be sitting here virtually with my great friend, Brandon Straka. I first became aware of Brandon, you had just barely kicked off the Walkaway movement, and it was an astounding, game-changing kind of thing. I met you, heard your story, and was so inspired not only by your message, but your energy, your charisma, your courage, and then how you were able to build just through who you are, this amazing and very effective movement. And I was so impressed to such a degree that actually AFA created an award to honor you, our Game Changer Award, because that is absolutely who you are. So it's such a delight to be speaking with you, Brandon. Great to see you.
Great to see you. Thank you. That was a really nice introduction. I guess we're going to have to pretend to be really professional today because that's not really how we are with each other. But
no.
I mean, I think we could give everyone a glimpse into our regular phone calls when we just sort of laugh and laugh and laugh and laugh. But yes. Today we'll try to be serious.
We'll be professional-ish.
Right.
Yeah.
Ish. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and right, exactly. It's going to be a challenge because we do talk often, and in fact, before the events of January 6th, we had spoken, and I, in fact, went to the insurrection on January 6th because I felt that there were sufficient shenanigans in the election that warranted being addressed by Congress, and they were going to be addressed on that day. I think I speak for a few 100,000 of us, no doubt including you, that we were there to support through our presence, not our actions, but our presence, those who needed the moral courage to say, let's hold off on some of these allocations of electoral votes until we're absolutely certain, because this is a very big deal. The United States, it's very important to have transparent transfer of power. That's great and all of that. But part of that is a legitimate and transparent investigation and knowledge and process of to whom to transfer power to. And at that point, it did not seem clear. And so on January 6th was going to be a process that was going to be happening in the Capitol. And I was there in order to support those who needed courage to make sure it was legitimate.
Yeah. And
that was it.
Right. And I think you sort of outlined that well, because as we know, as the left typically does, this very, very ridiculous narrative has been created, which, becomes further and further from reality and the truth on every passing day. But if you were to believe what the left-wing media is telling you, if you're a person who tunes into CNN and MSNBC and you actually believe what they're telling you, then what you would think is that people went to Washington, D.C. with the intention of breaking into the Capitol and forcing through violence Congress to certify Donald Trump as the president. And okay, look, if anybody went to Washington, D.C. with that intention, I don't know anything about it. Let me just be clear. So if that ends up being proven true for any individuals, then shame on them. And, that shouldn't have happened. And that's not why hundreds of thousands of us came on that day.
Right.
I know that I came, and I believe that the vast majority, if not every person who came to Washington, D.C., of the hundreds of thousands on that day, was because, as you pointed out, there were a number of irregularities that were coming to light between November and January. And because rather than moving forward with certification without investigating those irregularities, we wanted an audit, a thorough, sufficient audit of the vote. And I have always said, and everyone I talk to always said, if the audit is conducted, a satisfactory audit that clearly shows that Joe Biden got the most electoral votes, then it is what it is. And we have to just, lick our wounds and try better next time. I mean, that's exactly what it is.
Exactly right. Exactly.
But I don't think, it seemed like there was kind of this steamrolling of, nope, we're not going to look, we're not going to ask questions, we're moving forward. This is the way that it is. And so people were becoming increasingly agitated because they felt like if the results of the election are absolutely accurate, then I don't think anyone should have any objection to auditing and investigating them. Let's just be sure. And it didn't feel like that's what happened.
Yeah, it certainly it didn't. And that day was about exactly that process. That was the day. That was the designated day of what was going to be happening in Congress, that they were going to start examining where there were, those few states where there were two sets of electoral results and so on, to ensure the legitimacy of the elections in the United States of America. Surely everybody should want that. I don't care what side you're on. If you're a Biden person, if you're a Trump person, if you're a, whoever else person, the legitimate handing over of power to a legitimately elected president, we should all want this.
We should all want that.
Right? I mean,
yeah.
They were saying 4 or 5 years ago now that Trump wasn't legitimately elected. Okay, if they had gone through various processes, their audits could have happened. We just wanted the process to be carried out. Right?
Right. Everyone wanted to feel like they knew that their vote counted, and that their vote wasn't canceled out by the vote of a person who was dead or illegally on a voter roll, or a duplicated ballot from a drop box, or a ballot without a signature on it, or a ballot that arrived after the due date for the mail-in voting. I mean, there were a number of different things that were not handled correctly, it seemed. And unfortunately, I don't think we'll ever know for sure.
We probably won't ever know. But even by that point, we knew on election night, in a number of states, they stopped counting and sent the observers away. And then other observers were told you can be 20 feet. Anyway, there were enough, as you said, irregularities to warrant concern about the legitimacy. That's why we were there, hoping that the process would continue. That's why I flew from California, not for an insurrection, but to support literally the democratic process of the transfer of power. And I went to hear speakers. In fact, there were speakers slated for that afternoon, and that's when I bought my tickets, even before the president was announced to be speaking in the morning. And as I remember, you were one of the announced speakers. So, when it comes to this whole insurrection narrative, you were supposed to be there because you were one of the speakers.
Right. So I wasn't an organizer, and I wasn't privy to many conversations about, logistics and scheduling and things like that. And I've done enough events over the last 3 years to know that if it's an outdoor event, things have to be very fluid. Like, there's a huge difference between an indoor and an outdoor event. If you're scheduled to be a speaker at a dinner or some sort of conference or something, and someone says you're on at 7:00, you're pretty much going to be on at 7:00, and that's how it works. If it's an outdoor rally and someone tells you you're speaking at 10 a.m., you might be going on at 3 or 4 p.m. And
Right.
it's always the way that it is. So I wasn't surprised at all when they told me I think originally they said I was going to be speaking around 10 a.m.
Mm-hmm.
And then they said, well, now it's changing because now there's going to be this thing at the Ellipse, and then there's going to be the march to the Capitol. So, the president's going to be speaking. So obviously, you'll be speaking like significantly after the president speaks. And then it was, it's so hard to remember now because a lot of this wasn't even written down, in emails or texts. It was just things I was hearing on the phone and stuff. And, people were saying, well, the president's now speaking at 9 a.m. and he's speaking at 10 a.m. And if I remember correctly, I don't think he went on until like noon. And so although I was scheduled to speak, I think at one point at like 10 a.m. I mean, obviously by the time you're there and the president's on at noon, it's like, okay, well, I'm probably going to be speaking at 3 or 4 or after.
Right.
And so we sat there, we watched the president speak, and he very clearly told everyone to march peacefully to the Capitol and assemble peacefully at the Capitol.
Absolutely. Yes.
And to me, it seemed perfectly normal and in keeping with what my understanding was of how the day was going to unfold.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I started heading toward the Capitol, and I'd say that was probably around 2 p.m. And as I was getting near the Capitol grounds, I started getting messages from people who were at home saying that they were seeing or hearing on the news that people were going inside the building. And I didn't really know or understand what that meant. So I just started filming, and I was, probably 3 or more blocks away from the Capitol when I started filming. And I just took one long continuous video of myself approaching the East Side grounds, walking onto the grounds. And in my video, which is Mark Levin did a really amazing interview with me several weeks ago, which people can watch on his YouTube channel, Levin TV YouTube channel. In this interview with me, he actually shows my entire video, and we kind of go through it moment by moment and see. And what you'll notice is me walking onto the grounds. There aren't police officers present in my video, none, like zero.
Yeah.
The sidewalk, which is a huge sidewalk, I mean, the type of sidewalk that you could like drive a car on, not like a skinny, tiny little side, but a big sidewalk, is wide open. There is bike rack on the lawn, but the sidewalk itself was completely open. And so I walked onto the grounds, and people are just kind of calmly milling around, doing their thing, thousands of people. And I walked into the crowd of people. And then when I got there on the east side, there was a man standing at the top of the stairs with his hat in his hand, shouting down to the people below saying, they've opened the doors. We're going in. We're going in. They opened the doors. And so I proceeded up the steps on the east side. Now, this is the opposite side as where you've seen all of the images of people smashing windows and scaling walls and things like that. I didn't witness any of that where I was because it wasn't taking place where I was.
Right.
So I walked up to the top of the east side steps, and then I held my camera above my head and pointed it down toward the door because the 2 large metal doors were open. And there was a crowd of people, and some of the people were trying to make their way inside, and some were just standing there kind of watching. And I filmed for about 8 minutes. And then after about 8 minutes, a man stepped out of the Capitol and got on a bullhorn and said, they've cleared Congress. Everybody went home. Clear out, clear out. Now, as far as I know, I have no idea, but as far as I know, this man was a protester. I don't believe he was a police officer. Or, I mean, he looked like a protester. And so when he said that, I immediately turned around, and I actually told the people behind me, they're saying to clear out, clear out. And then I went down the steps, and I stayed on the outer Capitol grounds for about 20 or 30 minutes and just interviewed people. I took 13 videos interviewing people. And then I went back to my hotel, and I uploaded my original video of me walking up on the grounds and filming the open doors. I uploaded that to Twitter, and basically just said, this is what I witnessed today at the Capitol, something like that. And then about I'd say 1 to 2 hours after I uploaded the video, I was watching the news from my hotel room and started to see the violence and destruction and things that had taken place on the opposite side
Other
of the building,
side.
on the other
Right.
side. And I immediately took my video down immediately because I knew what was going to happen. I thought, now, mind you, I didn't know I would be in legal trouble. I never thought I would be in legal trouble, never.
Right.
But what I thought would happen is I was like, no one is going to make the distinction that this was on the other side of the building. Everyone's going to just think it's all the same thing. And I
Right.
was like, I'm going to come across as though I'm supporting that. And so I took the video down. I took all my tweets down that I had written that day. I deleted them. And I thought that was the end of it. And but for the next 2.5 weeks, what happened was my like Twitter trolls and people who hate me on Twitter, they had already copied my video immediately when I posted it. So they started just reposting this video over and over again and tagging the FBI and telling the FBI to have me arrested. And then a member of my family caught wind of this, and this member of my family contacted the FBI directly and sent them my video that was being posted on Twitter. And from that, 2.5 weeks later, an FBI SWAT team raided my apartment at dawn on Monday, January 25th. They presented me with a search warrant and began stripping my apartment of my computer, my phone, my iPad, my cameras, my hard drives, my clothing, and the other agents put me in handcuffs and took me to jail. And I spent several days in 24-hour lockdown because they told me I was facing multiple felony charges for what I had done at the Capitol.
I'm speechless. I mean, and it's utterly surreal just from every part of this, that it happened in the first place. And then that you were facing felony charges for standing where, by the way, you were scheduled to be a speaker, just incidentally.
Yeah.
And did.
Now, as it turns out, I mean, I guess to make a few clear distinctions, so they kind of got me on 2 charges for where I was. So they charged me with a felony of occupying restricted grounds.
Mm-hmm.
And then they also charged me with a misdemeanor of disorderly conduct on Capitol grounds. But the other felony was impeding an officer in the line of duty. And that charge came about because in my video, there's a moment where you see an officer come to the doorway. And remember, the doorway is about 20 feet away from where I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm holding my camera up in the air, shooting down toward the door. And an officer comes to the entrance of the doorway, and a person near him grabs his plastic shield out of his hand and takes it away from him. And then people in the crowd start, not many, but several people in the crowd start cheering, or not cheering, but chanting, take his shield. And the allegation was that I was encouraging the crowd to do that. And ultimately, that charge got dropped, and so did the other felony of occupying restricted grounds. But they pressed forward with the misdemeanor, and I ended up pleading guilty to the misdemeanor charge of disorderly conduct on Capitol grounds. And but the reason I'm bringing this up is because you talked about me being a scheduled speaker.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, I had no idea whatsoever what was going to transpire on that day. I mean, I did not. No one knew.
Right.
I don't believe anyone knew that would happen. But the area that was permitted for the event that I was speaking at was in. So I guess the Capitol is kind of broken into various. Well, I was going to say quadrants, but it might be more than quadrants. It might be octants. I don't know. There are many areas that are designated. And so we had, or when I say we, whoever was organizing the speakers had a permit for a section of the Capitol, and where I was on the steps was not in that permitted area. And so if I had only been in that permitted area, then this wouldn't have happened. But as it turns out, it is against the law to protest on the steps of the Capitol. And so the moment that I went up on the steps, and even though I was filming and whatever, that's against the law. And I use this example. In 2019, I believe Jane Fonda went on the steps of the Capitol to protest 5 Fridays in a row. She was doing climate change protests. And so for 5 Fridays, 5 consecutive Fridays, she got arrested for protesting on the Capitol steps. The difference was all the charges were dropped against her all 5 times. So despite the fact that she was a 5-time repeat offender,
Right,
for 5 consecutive weeks, the decision was made to drop the charges. Now, I'm not trying to compare apples and oranges because, when Jane Fonda was protesting, I don't think the doors were open. I don't think people were going inside. I don't think, it wasn't a certification. There were absolutely differences. The point I guess I'm trying to make is that the actual charge is very similar, and that the decision was made 5 times to drop her charge. And I wasn't so lucky.
No, this was your first charge.
Correct. And I don't have a criminal record. I mean, it was literally my first charge.
Right.
Yeah.
And everything that's happened subsequently. So the list of things that you've been having to deal with as a result of this, in contrast to Jane Fonda, you've had your bank accounts frozen, all your vehicles for fundraising stopped, social media, TSA, you're on a terrorism watch list.
I am.
This is
I am
utterly stunning to me.
Yeah, I think it's stunning to everyone, including most TSA agents. I have to say that it's been nice that every time that I travel, which is pretty frequently, the TSA agents are themselves kind of shocked and appalled that this is happening.
Good.
But essentially what happens is that they've given me a designation now, which is called Quad S, or when I get my boarding pass, SSSS is stamped on my boarding pass. And so when I go through security, it now triggers, I have to go through basically like hours of added security measures, including very invasive full body pat downs where they put their hands down my pants, they touch my genitals, they touch my backside, they take pictures of my boarding passes and pictures of my IDs, they take every item out of my bag and swab it for explosive materials, and all of these things take a lot of time. And they have to dedicate an entire security lane just to me and about 8 or 9 TSA agents. And then after I finally make my way through this security process, which takes about an hour, they have a team of agents follow me around the airport. And when I make it to my gate, they station the agents around me at the gate, and they bring a special machine to the gate. And so when we're finally boarding the plane, they once again swab every item in my bag and test it once again for explosive materials. And they give me another full body pat down in front of the other passengers. And so, as you can imagine, the other passengers are terrified as they're watching this happen. And then they spend the remainder of the flight terrified that I'm going to blow up the airplane, over what ended up being a nonviolent misdemeanor charge.
Right.
So that's where we are.
That is just, and just back to the Capitol for a second. So misdemeanor, you were in the wrong place at the wrong time with a few 100,000 people. So it's not really about where you were, right? Because they were all there too. And, old movies, they round everybody up in the paddy wagon and take them all off. That is not what happened. So even in the moment, nobody felt that you were a danger. And the reality is they know that you're not a violent danger, but they know their rules are different. They let Jane Fonda go. They're not letting you go because your actual crime wasn't about being at the Capitol. Your actual crime is in my thinking, I shouldn't say this as a statement, but you've been a tremendously effective force against the left. It's sort of like going after, what's his name, for tax evasion. It's not the tax evasion that's the issue. It's not the 8 minutes that's the issue. Brandon Straka is extraordinarily effective. You campaigned harder than just about anybody prior to the election. And then even with the Georgia senatorial election, you were one of the loudest and most active out there at that time, if I remember correctly. So
Yeah,
you're a huge threat.
Well, I appreciate the compliments, and I'd put together an initiative that I called Save the Senate, and basically assembled like thousands of volunteers and worked together with the Georgia GOP to train these volunteers in phone banking and door knocking. And then we just got out and, for the people who were maybe less mobile or less able to participate, they were making phone calls on behalf of the 2 senators for the Georgia Senate runoff. And then we had, other teams of volunteers knocking on doors throughout Georgia. And I was traveling all over the state doing that.
Yeah.
And I wish I had just stayed there and finished what I started, because I was supposed to be a poll watcher on January 5th in Georgia. And I ended up switching my plans to go to DC so that I could speak. And then, all of this happened. But, I don't even think it's, what's the word I want? Controversial or, arguable that is why. I mean, even the government kind of in the 30-page sentencing recommendation that they put together for me, they made it very clear that they felt that I needed to be punished severely because I am a person with a following and influence, and that people listen to me and I'm a leader. And essentially that what they were saying was, that I misused my power for evil, and that, I needed to be punished severely for that. And if that's what happened, I would agree with them. The problem is they kind of created this narrative of me being like a violent, demented lunatic who was encouraging my following, to engage in random and heinous acts of violence. And for anyone who knows me or has followed me, I mean, that's just a laughable.
It's completely laughable.
Yeah, it's laughable.
You were going to be a poll watcher.
Yeah.
A poll watcher. You were organizing door-to-door walking and phoning, and you had ads, and none of this is revolutionary insurrection-y kind of stuff. It was for a scheduled election. You came to an event whose purpose was to ensure, again, peaceful, legitimate elections, not anything insurrection-y at all. Everything that you were doing is completely of the people, by the people, for the people, according to a legitimate process, as in contradistinction to the process that actually occurred. Right?
Well, yeah, and I'm a person who always believes that like knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And even if the knowledge is not what you wish it was, it's still important and beneficial. I mean, to me, it's like if we audit the vote sufficiently and thoroughly, and we discover that legitimately Joe Biden got, 80 whatever million votes, we need that information. Like we need to know that, because then we know what we're dealing with.
Right.
And it's like, okay, I don't want him to get a second term, and I don't want the Democrats to be in control of Congress. But if the Democrats are legitimately this popular, we need to understand why and how and what they're doing that's reaching people. It does me no favors to, like, if the Democrats are legitimately that popular and Joe Biden is legitimately that popular, it does me no favors to be like, let's break into the Capitol and overthrow the government and force Donald Trump back into office, because that doesn't actually change public opinion. Right. And it's public opinion that we need to deal with, not just like, let's have a show of force and just force in the president that we want. I mean, that was never my mission or my goal.
Of course not. No, ridiculous. And you're absolutely right. Knowledge is power, and you can only move forward legitimately with a process, if you believe in the legitimacy of it, with the truth.
Right.
Right? You can't, and this is the difference between, I think, our side and the other side. They have a narrative that's created. It's a false narrative. It's fiction. And one of those fictional narratives is that, as you just said, this was some kind of a insurrection to take over. And then what are we going to do? Really? How preposterous. No, if anybody believes in the legitimate process, it is us. We are the anti-insurrectionists. So we believe in the you can only move forward legitimately based on truth. So we want the truth. And the truth was, you didn't come there to overthrow. I certainly didn't come there to overthrow. 500,000 didn't come there to overthrow. And by the way, nobody goes to an insurrection unarmed. This idea that it was an insurrection, but nobody, we were unarmed. The doors were open. There's pictures of people walking through, take selfies with statues. There's just, in no way does any of that look like an insurrection. And another thing that we all noticed, and I think this is going to speak to another thing that you're dealing with, there was very, very little in the way of police presence at that event. I've been to a ton of rallies and protests, and it was shocking how little police presence there was. So in fact, we were in danger. Nobody was protecting us. We were in danger, and not from you. Right? Did you notice?
No, I can't speak for any. Yeah. And I can't speak for anybody else's experience. I can only tell you that from my experience, again, and which again is all documented on video that people can watch.
Yeah.
I did not see any police officers on the grounds on the east side as I was walking in. Now, as I've stated in my video, there's a moment where an officer comes to the door and there's a whole incident, but it really bothers me, the narrative that's being put forward, because what the left-wing media wants you to think is that every person there was witnessing squads of police officers being abused and pushed around and shoved out. Like, not only did I see nothing of the sort, I didn't even see, like, I can't even claim that I saw police officers on the grounds, the outer grounds, being like, something's going on, you can't be here, like, don't come any further. That just didn't happen. It didn't happen.
So we actually were vulnerable, and not from you. So the whole thing, the entire narrative, to my thinking, was a fabrication, and to paint any of us who went there as a domestic terrorist, which is exactly what happened. And then not only that, but we wanted the process to continue. We didn't want it to stop. We wanted it to continue. So the reality was, all that wound up happening was, who benefited? They did.
Yeah.
We're the ones who really, I mean, you in a much more acute manner, but anybody who wanted the process to continue for legitimacy, we're the ones who really lost.
That's a really good point that honestly, I don't even know if I had fully considered until this moment, is that it's true. I mean, for the people who went inside and ended up, putting Congress in a position where they had to vacate the building and whatever, there were already members of Congress who were challenging the certification and saying that they wanted to, have a reprieve and give us 10 days, just 10 more days to audit this vote. And that process stopped because of the people. And then by the time Congress reconvened, the remainder of the Republicans or any of them were basically like, we're not going to halt and call for this audit.
Exactly. So who benefited? Not us.
No.
Right? So I don't know how it went so awry that afternoon, because, by the way, the president said march to the Capitol, not on the Capitol, and you had mentioned it too. The march
not
was
inside the Capitol,
not into it, not on it. It was, we're going to march from this place to this place, and then we were going to be outside and we were just going to be, supportive. That's what was going to happen. And then I don't know what the initial thing was and who it was. Was it frustrated people on the right? Were there infiltrators on the left? I don't know. Doesn't matter. It really went very south. And it's pivotal for the country, because it allowed them to paint us, including you, as domestic terrorists, because they did.
Yeah.
And to stop the process, that's what we wanted to have happen. So,
well,
really
I don't think that the majority of people who are calling me a domestic terrorist or an insurrectionist actually believe it. I think they take a lot of joy in being able to say it. In fact, I think they take a lot of joy in being able to say it, knowing that it's not true, that it's hurtful and it's damaging, but it's not true, but that they've been given the tools and the ability to say that and push it forward. Because we have an unfriendly DOJ right now. We have a DOJ that is not friendly to me. And I think if they had any actual opportunity to charge me with insurrection or terrorism, they would take that opportunity. But instead, what happened was that they investigated me thoroughly for an entire year, including interviewing me numerous times over the course of that year. And what they ultimately decided was that they felt comfortable charging me with a misdemeanor for disorderly conduct outside of the Capitol.
Yeah.
So how you square that with terrorism, I'm not sure. I mean, I didn't make this was their charge. They are the ones who decided to charge me with nonviolent misdemeanor class B disorderly conduct. So I don't feel like you get to do that and cry terrorism. You kind of have to choose, I think.
Yeah, and they came down in the court, in the official legal everything, nonviolent misdemeanor. So
Right.
how do you fight it? Not the charge, but this being painted as a insurrectionist.
Well, for me personally, you don't. I mean, I'm not I'm doing what I can to get my story out and to explain to people, what happened, what the facts are, what the facts are of my charges, what the facts are of my situation. But I'm not, look, before I was labeled as a terrorist and an insurrectionist, I mean, the hatred was exactly the same. Just the names were just different. I mean, before that, it was that I'm a grifter, I'm a traitor, I'm a fraud, I'm a self-loathing gay man, you know what I mean? It was a whole different list of names, but the hatred and the intent was exactly the same. So, I mean, at some point they're going to get bored of calling me an insurrectionist and a terrorist, because the thing, they don't even care. They don't care. None of these people care. I mean, nobody believes that January 6th was like Pearl Harbor or 9/11. No one believes in their stupid candlelight vigil. No one this is all theater. It's all show. That they know it's theater and they know it's show.
Yeah.
They know that a misdemeanor for being on the Capitol steps does not equate to domestic terrorism, and they're going to get bored of it after a while. And then it'll be something else. The hatred will remain the same, but instead of those names, it's going to be that I'm whatever I am next, which who can predict? But so you don't fight it. I don't fight it. I mean, the only thing I can fight is just getting out as much as I can and trying to correct the facts and the narrative of what I did and my actual level of involvement, and then not really worry about it, because it's not, you can't be charged with a misdemeanor and be a terrorist. It's the two things don't equate. But I think that a scary question,
not to laugh, but it's just crazy. But yeah.
But a scary question, I think, becomes, will they try to, I would have to imagine that they're going to move. I mean, they can't keep this alive forever, but would they try to make that a reality? Because our side has been saying for a year you can't call it an insurrection and no one's been charged with insurrection.
Right.
And, most people are being charged with nonviolent misdemeanors. Well, then lo and behold, they suddenly decided to go out and charge one or two people with seditious conspiracy. Now, I've done a little bit of investigation, and from everything I've seen, there are no grounds whatsoever to charge these people with that. But I think that they know that, and all they want are the headlines. Like, oh, now we've moved into the ground of seditious conspiracy. So that kind of explodes the right-wing theory that there was no insurrection because no one's been charged with insurrection. So, here I am running around saying, how are you going to charge, or how are you going to call me an insurrectionist or a terrorist when I've been charged with a misdemeanor? So God only knows. Maybe I'll get a knock on my door later today and find out that I'm being charged with terrorism. Who knows? Let's hope not. But
indeed, truth has never gotten in their way. I mean, we saw two impeachments of Donald Trump for things that, anyway, a whole nother path. But truth doesn't impede their narrative, as we said,
or their actions. Yeah,
at all, not at all. So, but here you are. That you're not an insurrectionist. You have nonviolent misdemeanor, again, first offense, and yet it took them a year to figure this all out. It took them a number of delays and delays with the entire process then of your sentencing. You have an ankle bracelet. You can't leave your home.
Right.
Probation.
So I was finally sentenced about three and a half weeks ago. And after a year of waiting, after a year of being on pretrial supervision and spending multiple days in jail and 24-hour lockdown for this case, I ended up pleading guilty to a misdemeanor, and then was finally sentenced about 3.5 weeks ago, and sentenced to 3 months of house arrest and 3 years of probation and 60 hours of community service and a $5,000 fine and $500 restitution. And I'm wearing an ankle monitor right now to keep me confined to my home.
Incredible. For
my apartment.
First offense, nonviolent misdemeanor. And
right.
I don't think Jane Fonda had anything like that. Not her first, second, third, fourth, fifth.
She didn't even get sentenced. So,
right. So there you are.
Didn't go that far for her.
No. And in fact, your judge, if we can talk about your judge for a second, there was a 30-page sentencing recommendation, right? Which is kind of crazy, again, for a nonviolent misdemeanor. This is just, it's surreal. 30 pages documenting the evil of you.
Yeah. Well, that wasn't the judge, though. That was the prosecution.
That's the prosecution
that wrote that. Yeah.
And then the judge took all of that to heart.
It seems that way. I mean, certainly I don't know exactly what her thought process was, but the feeling I got was that she believed the government narrative of who I am and what my intentions were and what I did and why I did it, and what I saw and what I smelled and what I heard and all of those things.
That's right.
And I mean, obviously, it was very frustrating and very disappointing to be at the mercy of somebody who believes that. But at the same time, I guess I just have to be understanding about it and realize that, she's a person who all she knows of me is, she read this document and she read this document. Mm-hmm. She read the prosecution's document and she read our document. Mm-hmm. And she watched my video as well. And, based off of those things, and I mean, I'm just one of God knows how many cases she has to deal with. She had to make a decision about what she believed. And in my opinion, I think she believed a narrative about me that just wasn't reality. But, she doesn't know me. She doesn't, right. We've never met. We've never spent time together. She didn't have the benefit of kind of seeing the breadth of the work that I've done, or so.
To what extent does courage play a role or lack thereof? I know for you as an individual from the beginning, starting Walkaway took more courage than any of us can even imagine. I mean, you walked away from your life, your community, your friends, your, in a lot of cases, your family, and started this incredibly courageous movement that encouraged other people through your modeling of it to also be courageous. And you gave people a place to walk to, a community to be part of. And I just think that took amazing courage. Everything that you did before the election, supporting Trump, was courageous. The Senate thing was courageous. Going to Washington was more courageous than you had bargained for. Have you seen other people standing up in solidarity with you? I mean, like I said, you were not the only one at the steps, right? What I'm kind of shocked about, and I'm a little bit chagrined and ashamed my own self, why did we not stand with you and say, we were there too? I mean, this misdemeanor, how are we not all guilty of the same misdemeanor? Why are we not all saying, I am Brandon Straka? Because they're coming after you in this outrageous way because of your effectiveness. We're not as effective, obviously, but we stand with you. Were there people who stood with you?
Well, certainly in a private way. I mean, I had an enormous amount of people sending me love and messages of positivity and emails and social media posts, things like that. But in terms of, like the conservative influencers and kind of the other people who have reach and who have a voice, not many. And here's the thing. I mean, what you just described would have been, I think, a very bold and brave thing for people to say, why not all of us? Or, if you arrest him, arrest me. That's a bold move. But I would have settled for, a number of people who know me, who've worked with me, who have, who know my heart, who know my character, who know my integrity, just to simply speak up and say, I just want to say that I know Brandon Straka is a good guy. Even if they said, look, I don't know all the facts, I don't know for sure what happened, or, whatever, but I'm willing to say that this is a good guy. And even if he made a mistake, he made a mistake. But, I would have settled for that. But there wasn't even really that. I think it just became a culture of fear and a culture of, I don't want to be the person to stick my neck out for Brandon Straka, because what if I'm the only one? And then I look like I'm supporting an insurrectionist, and then I might get attacked. And then it's just that. And it's, unfortunately, we just never really learn these lessons, do we? I mean, because there's, when it doesn't matter, people are happy to, espouse these, and then there was no one left to speak for me, or all that's needed for evil to triumph is for good men to do nothing and stuff. And then the moment comes and everyone's like, and it's so.
Exactly. And it really is disturbing. And exactly right. The NIML, first they came for this group and I did nothing because it wasn't me. And here they are coming after you. And they came after you. And we kind of did nothing. I'm going to throw this out there. It hadn't really crossed my mind before, but all of these proceedings, your court proceedings, happened on phone calls. Nothing was in a courtroom. I mean, in the olden days, pre-COVID, one could have amassed, people there. We could have been there. It's difficult when everything is virtual. And I'm not saying we would have, because maybe we wouldn't have. But it's hard to know how to show support in this time when we are being isolated.
Maybe. maybe, but I hear your point, but here's where I would push back on it. The virtual hearings all had a call-in line.
Yeah.
So all of them. So at any point, people could call in and listen and get information. Now, for all of my hearings, because I had friends and coworkers who would call and listen, and it tells you the number of people on the line. And usually people would tell me that when they logged on that there were like over 500 people listening. I'm sure the number was actually greater than that, depending on if you called 5 minutes later or 10 minutes later.
Right.
Here's the thing. The majority, I'm quite sure, of people who were listening were left-wing reporters. So the left-wing reporters never missed an opportunity to listen in on just about every one of these January 6th hearings, not just mine. Mine was probably more popular. But I don't know if you've noticed, every time a January 6th defendant has a hearing or gets sentenced or gets arrested, it's all over the left-wing news. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if the person got charged with littering on a misdemeanor for littering outside of the Capitol. It's, MAGA rioter from Wisconsin arrested for role in insurrection. That's a headline, and dozens.
Right.
I don't know if you've noticed, you never, ever read a story in a conservative news outlet about me or any of these people. So my point here is, yes, it might be harder for people to know how to support in a virtual age.
Yeah.
But the left knows what they're doing. Like every single one of these hearings, hundreds of left-wing reporters are salivating on the line, whatever. I'd be willing to guess that besides Julie Kelly and maybe a couple other people, there are next to zero right-wing media outlets or reporters listening. They don't give a damn about telling these stories. They don't give a damn about correcting the narrative. I mean, and they could. The same time that CNN and MSNBC and the Times or whatever are doing their, another MAGA rioter arrested for role in insurrection, Fox News, Newsmax, Breitbart, Western Journal, Epoch Times, any of these people could be doing stories saying Wisconsin man charged with littering and called an insurrection. They could be right, but they don't.
Right, but they don't.
Never happens. Never
Any
happens.
thoughts as to why on earth that is? I mean, that is so supremely disappointing. When you came over from the left to us, you must have had a thought that we would support our own. And
I would have hoped, yeah.
Would have hoped. And I imagine that we do. But now one of the things that we're learning through your situation and others, we don't.
No. And the reason you asked me, why do I think that is? I do think that there are a number of outlets who are afraid to even just get near a January 6th story. And again, the reason why is because they've allowed this to get out of control.
Yeah.
If they took the tack that I mentioned a moment ago from the very beginning,
right,
then there could have been an equal kind of balance back and forth, and people would have seen more clearly that the left is calling every person who gets arrested like a contributor to and trying to overthrow the government, even if the person was only charged with a misdemeanor of trespassing or something like that. But so there's fear because it's gotten so out of control.
Right.
But there's also there's just I don't know if you would call it laziness or complacency, but there's just this lack of wanting to get involved. I mean, and that's not just the conservative media. We're always reacting. We're never on the offensive. We're always on the defensive. And I think that at this point, people just don't even know how to be defensive about it. And so they're just like, well, we've lost the January 6th battle. So let's just try to do better next time for the next thing. And it's like, well, what if you just weren't always being reactionary? What if you actually got involved and were tough and assertive and, took a stand right at the beginning and pushed back? But we don't. Our people never do. And so, that's how they take over academia and social media and the news media and
everything.
the criminal justice system. And and then we just are always trying to scramble to pick up the pieces.
And the intimidation factor is huge. I mean, look what they've done to you, and you're one of many, but the canceling, the shutting down, the debanking, deplatforming, silencing, crushing, destroying careers. And I want to talk about destroying individuals as people too, but we've seen that. So yes, we don't have courage, but we also see what happens if we go against them. And we never, not only do we not retaliate, but we never take those kinds of tactics. I don't think there's anybody who can say they're afraid of us.
Yeah.
Right.
Well,
we don't inspire fear. We don't intimidate. Maxine Waters comes out and says, let's fight back. And we need to, the left has always said we need to destroy them. We need to shut them out. We need to hurt them. We need to not serve them. And we need to punish them. We never, not ever. And we watched our cities burn 2 years ago in mostly peaceful protests. We do nothing. And I remember the evening of January 6th, sitting there in my hotel room in Washington going, I really hope there's an investigation into this, because really bad things happened. There weren't sufficient police. There wasn't. And Nancy Pelosi had talked about ethics charges against Ted Cruz and others. And I thought, that's going on the offense. Why are we not going on the offense against Nancy Pelosi? Because they were her Capitol Hill police. 2 years later, 1 year later, we don't do that.
No. And don't forget, I mean, there was an opportunity too in 2020 to, it's extreme, but to invoke the Insurrection Act. And just send the National Guard into these cities. And I mean, what a powerful statement that would have been. In my opinion, it was a gross miscalculation. I believe that Trump probably thought that by basically kind of dangling this, as soon as these Democrat mayors and governors reach out and tell me they want the National Guard, I'm ready to send the National Guard. But until they do, it's up to them. And I think in his mind, he thought, well, we're going to allow them to expose how they're willing to let their own cities and states burn and be destroyed. And that is going to wake up all of these people. And it didn't, because again, our side is so terrible at putting forward a narrative or anything that Black Lives Matter convinced that their whole voting base and probably a lot of independents that this racial justice violence was warranted and that we were having a reckoning in this country, and that if neighborhoods and businesses get destroyed, well, that's terrible, but this is a moment in history that's needed. And we ended up just looking weak and incompetent once again. And I mean, like, how powerful would it be today if we had taken control of the word insurrection, and invoked the Insurrection Act? And now instead we're the insurrectionists,
right?
Meanwhile, they did $2 billion worth of damage in 2020, the most expensive, violent and destructive rioting in American history.
Right.
And nobody even cares. No one even cares.
Nobody even cares. And deaths and destruction of businesses, by the way, minority businesses. And these were a lot of minority-owned, minority areas. So again, who benefits? And I love your thought about we would have taken control of the word insurrection, because they are very good at that. And now where are we? So we've seen that destruction does, and the Capitol event doesn't hold a candle to that at all. And now they're calling the truckers insurrectionists.
Oh, everything's going to be an insurrection now that they've made that word scary. And, made that like synonymous with republicanism. And so there's several words now that are all synonymous with each other: Republican, white supremacist, racist, bigot, insurrectionist, domestic terrorist. These are all now like interchangeable words. And again, our leaders have allowed this to happen. So all they have to do is just invoke any of these words, and it's a dog whistle, and their base gets what it means. Right. So, these truckers are doing things that are against our political beliefs. So let's use the word insurrection. Boom. And collusion, for a long time, the word collusion was the thing. And then it became, this one was colluding with this one, and this one's like, it just became a buzzword.
Yeah.
And people were just using it willy-nilly in ways that didn't even make sense half the time. It was, oh, Trump's colluding with this one to do this, and now this one's colluding with this one. And it's like, okay, that's not even what colluding means. We're now like not even using the actual definition of the word, but we get it. It's become a scary buzzword.
Right.
And you're just, and that's kind of where we are now with these terms.
Yeah. And again, as you say, we don't fight back, and we never go on the offensive. We don't even know how. Our brains don't work that way. What can we call somebody? You're
anarchist, a socialist, a communist, a divider, race baiter. I mean, there's a number of things that we could call these people.
Yeah, intolerant.
Yeah.
Divider is good. And actually,
a liar,
they are
a manipulator, a deceiver, a propagandist.
Each one of which is actually true, it doesn't require the modification of the language for that.
No, it doesn't.
So just thinking back on all that you've gone through and the discoveries that you've made, and you talk about the hate that's come at you. The hate hasn't changed, the charges have. What does this do? What does this do to you?
Well, my answer to that question is that of course, like, you have to have a thick skin to do what I do, or to do what a lot of us do who are out there being outspoken and being public facing about what we do. But I have a thick skin. That's not to say that I don't ever get hurt or bothered by things that people say, especially if they're not true, and they become a little bit trendy. These certain lies or the name calling or accusations, what have you. But it doesn't affect me that greatly. What affects me is the silence of the people who are supposed to be my friends and allies. Like, that's the damaging part, because I do believe that there are moments in life, and thank God most people never have to go through something as dark and harrowing and terrifying as what I've gone through. But in everyone's own way, most people will go through something in their life that's kind of a pivotal moment that shows them who their friends are, who their friends are not, who's there for them when they really need it.
Yeah.
And for me, this has been very scary and upsetting, because, if you had told me a year and a half ago that I was going to go through something like this, I would have thought, well, I'm going to have so much support. The media is going to have my back. All of these people, I did all of these events at Republican clubs all across the country, right, where I received all of these awards, and Patriot Awards, and the Patriot of the Year, and the this and that. And oh my God, Brandon Straka is so brave, and he's a game changer. And I'm not talking about you, but no. I'm not talking about you. I mean, you and I talked constantly this last year, but there was just so much love and support. I wouldn't have believed it was possible that I could disappear and that life would just kind of go on. And not much would be said about it. And the feeling that I got, and that I have, is that I think I could have never come back, and no questions would have been asked. I mean, I think if I had made the choice to just not resurrect my life and my career and walk away, I don't think very many people ever would have been like, what happened to him? Or
you really don't think so?
I mean, people might have asked the question, but I don't think it would have gone much further than that. I mean, I who knows? I mean, yeah, I do kind of feel that way. And so that leaves you with this feeling of like, okay, the way that I thought things were is not really the way that things are. And can I be okay with that?
Mhm.
Like, can I be okay with the knowledge that everything that I'm doing doesn't really buy me the security that I thought that I had? Because I don't think that I do. And can I be okay with that? Can I just continue forward and keep doing the work and know that if God forbid something like this happens again, the result will probably be the same, and that I will end up kind of going through this alone? And so then, you have to weigh, is the mission and the work and what I want to accomplish greater than any feeling of betrayal or resentment or sadness that I feel about the lack of being lifted up during a really dark time? And obviously, to me, the answer is yes, because I am going to move forward. I am going to continue, I'm going to continue on and do the work that I do, but my eyes are opened. I know the score now. And, the goal at this point is to just never, ever, ever again be in a position where something like this can happen to me.
Right.
Because unfortunately, I know what's going on,
But you are courageous, and when you came over to this side, my expectation maybe is that you understood that we don't exploit, we don't, we are for various tenets, that all that stuff still holds true. And while as individuals and organizations and institutions we're disappointing, and I get that, we are, the mission is still the right one.
Yes.
And our
Yes.
side still is the ones fighting for what is good and right and true, even if many of us as humans fail, and not everybody on our side is mission driven as you are. The mission is still important, I would imagine, but the sense of betrayal has to be powerful.
It is powerful. It is powerful, but I have never doubted that my followers and my fans and the Walkaway community, they've been there, they've had my back, they've continued to support, they've supported financially, they've supported through letters of love and through emails and things like that. So, I do have to tell you that I have like less than 5 minutes right now because I have another interview that I have to do. But I guess maybe we can end it on kind of a cheesy note, and I can say that in a way it's kind of like the message that from the Wizard of Oz, I mean, maybe don't go looking further than your own backyard for what you feel like you really need, because I think that I have the lesson here for me is that I don't need anything more than the love and support and fellowship and camaraderie of the Walkaway community. And that going and seeking that out among, some of the conservative A-listers or people in the RNC or, the decision makers in the Trump campaign and whatever, maybe I just shouldn't be chasing that affirmation or chasing.
Interesting.
Maybe I should just keep my eyes on the prize, which is the work that I'm doing with Walkaway and this beautiful and amazing community that we've built, and this movement that I think is just absolutely essential to the success of our country going forward. And so moving forward, I think that I'm going to kind of stay in my lane and just keep my eye on what's really important. And I think it's that.
It's a great message, Brandon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking so much time, and I can't wait to talk to you again and have you come out to California again, and come speak to us. And people can help you out by going to brandonstrock.com. You have that right there.
And check this out too, because we just recently gave walkawaycampaign.com a major facelift. I mean, we completely changed and revitalized the website. And I might be a little biased, but I think it's the most amazing website on the web right now. I mean, it's we're very proud of walkawaycampaign.com. It looks
Oh,
really cool, and make it a point to click through every page, like literally every single page, because we have all these, we took all of the people who've done our events and just different people who've supported, and we gave them a little moment with a little quote. And so there's all
wow.
these really great quotes and great pictures. And we really, this time, so the old walkawaycampaign.com, before we facelifted it, was the first one that we created back in 2018. And back then, we were just trying to kind of get control of the walkaway movement because it was blowing up so quickly. So we put my face on everything. So like everywhere you went, there was like Brandon Straka, Brandon Straka, and Brandon Straka. But on the new walkawaycampaign.com, we really make it all about the people and the community, which is the way it should be. So it's just page after page after page of beautiful pictures of the walkaway community doing incredible, marches and rallies and all that. Just check it out, you guys. It's really cool.
So
it's
great.
really cool.
Thank you. And really,
Yeah.
what you radiated then and what you radiate now is just goodness and love, and this juxtaposition of what you're going through and who you are is painful to see. But we do know your heart, Brandon, and you are full of love, and you give a space for other people to feel the same way. So
Thank you.
thank you. You are a wonderful.
I love you. Thanks, Karen.
Love you too, Brandon.